Soaring through space, exploring wide open planets, and taking on enemy robots, Starlink Battle for Atlas feels like one grand space adventure. It's Ubisoft's introduction to the toys-to-life genre that feels more like a structured No Man's Sky game with the cool addition of the Starfox team on Nintendo Switch. It's an ambitious title, but one that falls back on repetition more than I would have liked. Starlink Battle for Atlas takes you on an adventure through the Atlas star system. A scientist named Victor recently made contact with an alien pilot named Judge, and wanting to learn more about their origin, he recruits you along with the rest of the Starlink crew to help him out. Your first mission is to go retrieve an artifact that can help out Victor's research. That mission quickly spirals you onto a new series of adventures. If you're playing on the Nintendo Switch, you'll come across the Starfox team who's on a search for Wolf. They essentially become part of the Starlink team while also adding on a minor side campaign that adds in about an hour or so of extra content. However, regardless of which platform you're playing on, things quickly go wrong and Victor is kidnapped by the evil Legion and their leader Grax. Grax is after an ancient technology that Victor knows about, but rather than use it for good, he wants to use it to take over Atlas. It's a pretty straightforward story that has you traversing through the Atlas star system, gathering help from allies in exchange for helping them out with their own problems. It's a familiar story formula to say the least. The inclusion of the Starfox team, despite being so last minute in the development of the game, doesn't feel too rushed. They actually feel like they could have been part of this universe from the beginning. I really would have loved to see the Starfox campaign be more fleshed out, but with it being exclusive content to the Nintendo Switch version, I can see why it's only about an hour to 2 hours long. Ultimately, I thought Starlink's 20-hour story played it pretty safe with a very familiar narrative that's been done by plenty of other games. However, seeing Fox McCloud and his friends in both this new but also somewhat familiar setting was a pretty cool experience, even if it was so short. The world of Starlink is huge, and it's populated just enough to make it feel like there's something to do at every moment. Exploring the depths of space or just cruising through a new planet, there's always something to do. At first glance, it reminded me a lot of No Man's Sky's original launch, but since playing it for the last few days, it certainly feels much more structured with a purpose from a gameplay standpoint. Flying through space, you'll be greeted with a beautiful vista of planets in the far distance and the giant Equinox mothership. Occasionally you'll run into enemy outlaws to fight against in an all-range mode like battle, or just old shipwrecks to loot in space. They were amusing at first, but quickly became repetitive in the emptiness of space. Part of that is due to just how slow space travel can feel. Early on you're introduced to the hyperdrive, a super fast boost that can get you to planets much faster than normal speed. The only problem with it is that it's hilariously still slow. When I first activated the hyperdrive to get to my first planet, I remember thinking, oh, that's it, as I slowly made my way past through the asteroid belt. Luckily you can fast travel to previously explored locations, but the first time contact on some of these planets certainly felt like a drag at times. There are a few exceptions, like the large-scale space fights where you take on waves of enemies along with a much larger spaceship. These sequences felt like a combination of the Bolts and Venom level in Star Fox 64. They were easily my favorite parts of space travel that made me somewhat forget about my earlier criticisms. On the other hand, there's so much more to do on planets, and that's where I spent most of my time playing. Each of the planets offer a large-scale world to explore and plenty of things to do. Naturally, the game's main story will have you doing missions across multiple planets. These missions boil down to recruiting more people to help you take down the Legion, but you'll have to help them out first. This means that you'll constantly be looking for resources to take on enemies and generally just helping people out on these planets in exchange for their own help. It all introduces a really interesting strategy to how these missions are connected. You see, enemies on these planets work like a fission reaction. Taking on smaller enemies affects medium-scale ones, and those then affect larger ones, and so on. So you'll be chipping away at the Legion from planet to planet, from small enemies to larger ones in this living universe. I call it a living universe because these forces can come back after you've liberated a planet. It introduces a sense of management strategy to keep an eye on old planets even after you've liberated them, because the Legion can come back at any time. The other parts of strategy come from the RPG mechanics. Pilots and ships can be upgraded using mods for your ships and new skills for your pilots. Ships can also be swapped out with different parts like wings and weapons that affect the control and the combat of your ship. This is also where Ubisoft's entry into the toys-to-life market comes into play. When buying the game physically, you'll get a physical model of a ship that you can then mod physically in the real world to reflect your ship in the game. The physical starter kit that comes with an R-Wing model comes with 2 ships and 2 pilots for $75. The problem with that is that the digital version only costs $60, it doesn't come with the toy, but it does come with way more ships and pilots. Sure, the toys look cool, but ultimately they feel like a gimmick. You can swap weapons on your ship entirely within the game digitally too, so really it's just there as a toy itself, nothing really there in terms of game content. This ends up making the toys feel rather pointless from a gameplay standpoint. They're nice toys, but that's about it. You're better off getting the digital version for the extra content it comes with at the cost of not having the toy. Buying the physical version actually ends up as a handicap because each ship acts as a life, so buying the more expensive version means you'll actually have fewer lives and weapons from the start of the game as compared to the digital one. I also wanted to mention that there is a co-op option in the game, though since I was primarily playing the Nintendo Switch version for my review, I personally really didn't enjoy or play it that much. The idea of going on this space adventure with a friend is pretty interesting, but I found the 20 frames per second performance on the Switch to be too much to put up with. If you plan on playing co-op or just want to in the future, I recommend going with the other platforms instead. Roaming around planets feels almost therapeutic as the lush and vibrant worlds consume your point of view. The size of planets and the different terrains really make this universe feel vast. Cutscenes are well animated too, looking like something in between an actual video game cutscene and an animated movie. It certainly puts a smile on my face just to see Foss McCloud and his crew once again. On higher end consoles like the Xbox One and PS4, you can expect 1080p 60 visuals with even higher resolutions at 4K if you're playing on an Xbox One X or PS4 Pro. The higher resolution visuals make the cartoon art style of the world look crisp. Of course, that had to be drawn back for the Nintendo Switch version. On the Switch, visuals look to run at 900p 30 in dock mode and 720p 30 in handheld mode. Things look a bit fuzzier, with the draw distance really being the most apparent drawback to me from other platforms. Even with those drawbacks though, the presentation here is admittedly pretty impressive. When sunlight hits your ship at just the right angle for a beautiful sunset, the visuals shine even looking this fuzzy. Now the worst performance I've seen on the Switch version in particular is when jumping into the co-op mode. Frames will dip down from the 30 frames per second mark all the way down to the very bottom of the 20 frames per second mark anytime there's any action on screen. It's pretty hard to watch and play, and really it's the one thing I'd say the Switch version is not suitable for.
Once those are down, the extractor's core will be exposed.
No, 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 no!
Starlink's music feels soothing in the sense that it's really relaxing to listen to as you explore the balanced scopes of space and planets. At the same time, the soundtrack can pick up on the bass side of things for some of the more intense boss fights. The musical range of genres is quite broad here, but what really won me over more than the music was the voice acting and the sound effects. With futuristic settings in games like this, I think it's quite easy for the presentation to cheap out with very generic sounding effects. Starlink Battle for Atlas doesn't though. There's a sense of quality just swapping out different parts of your ship and interacting with the HUD. Voice acting is also stellar, with the cast of Starlink and Starfox delivering great performances all around. It certainly brought a smile to my face just to hear the classic Starfox dialogue once again. There's even a nostalgic throwback to the Corneria theme anytime you call upon the Starfox team for help. Playing on the Nintendo Switch, there is a bit of use of HD Rumble, though I wasn't too big of a fan of it. It happens whenever you get shot, but personally I think it would have worked better to be used with something like the thrusters on a ship or the rapid fire lasers on an R-Wing. I think it would have been much more immersive. Starlink Battle for Atlas feels like a game with ambitious ideas that plays it safe with repetitive gameplay design and really weird pricing. A space exploration game that has you visiting different planets to gather resources, take on a big bad army with the inclusion of the Starfox team. That sounds amazing, and yet Starlink just makes it feel okay. It's not a terrible game, but I don't think I'd call it good either. It's just okay. In the end, Starlink's gameplay was just way too shallow for me to really enjoy for what it was trying to do, especially at that really odd price point where the most expensive version has the least amount of content. Additionally, I just wasn't captivated by the narrative all that much. It was the same formula story of having your mentor or leader figure get kidnapped, now forcing you and your team to work together to go save him. The really only interesting part of that was the addition of Nintendo's Starfox team that really threw a wrench into it all, but really only lasted about 2 hours of extra content. I would have loved to see it be played out or fleshed out much more and see more aspects of that unique franchise be ported into Starlink to make something completely new. If I were to ever recommend this game, I'd say get it at a discounted price and pick up the digital version over the physical one for more content over just a toy that you're probably going to put up on display. I give Starlink Battle for Atlas a 7 out of 10, and it's just barely there. This is the instance where I wish I didn't go by 0.5s and could have thrown in a 6.75 in there, but for the time being, a 7 out of 10. If you found this review helpful, then please be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share it with your friends. I'm aiming to hit 100,000 subscribers pretty soon, and I'd really appreciate your help. Thank you all very much for watching, hope you guys have a great day, and keep on gaming.